All right, we are recording now. So as I said before, I'm just going to go over some kind of administrative stuff about the website and a couple of ideas that I want to share. And then I'm going to pass it off to John Bush, who is here on the call. And John's going to facilitate for a little while, and then maybe we can pass it off to another person. I'm going to try to keep the call to, an hour, hour and a half to respect everybody's time. So we'll be getting ready to do that. And basically after I do this, John's going to take over, and anybody who wants to share about their cell, their group, any questions they have or suggestions or just what's happening with them, then we'll open up the table. And I do have everybody muted since we had somebody being a little silly last time. So you'll have to use the button. There's like a raise hand thing or comment in the chat, and we'll help John look out for people who want to speak, and then we can unmute you and then let you share what you want to share. So, all right, first thing, again, everybody here, I'm hoping is on the freedomcells.org website. If you haven't joined, please do join. It's been up for the last couple months. It's been up for the last couple years, but we rebuilt it and relaunched it the last few months, and it's been growing exponentially. We have over 2,000 people on the current website now, which is back past what we had originally. And it's kind of because of COVID-19, lots of people are looking for solutions. And so the website's been growing and the idea has been growing. It's been really great. One thing I do want to say, if you do sign up or if you have friends who are signing up, make sure that you check your spam folder. We have about 150 people who are waiting to be activated because they haven't noticed their spam. The email just seems to go in your spam folder. So you got to look in there. And if you have somebody who's waiting, let them know to look there, or just email us and we'll just get you set up. That seems to have been a minor issue. Also, one thing, a couple of people emailed me saying that the staticky background on the front page was going to give people seizures. So we changed that. We're trying to be considerate. We don't want anybody to have seizures. Also, we're trying to build the website and make it more encrypted, possibly put it on a blockchain, make it more decentralized. So I want to say in regards to that, I've seen some people worrying that the website's, a CIA honeypot it's set up so you guys can get caught by telling everybody where you're at on the Freedom Cells map. That is not the purpose of the website. I wouldn't put your home address for your specific house when you put your address, but I'd put your neighborhood or your city or somewhere nearby that you feel comfortable when you're adding yourself to the map. And I also wouldn't say anything on there that you think, could get you in trouble, just like you probably shouldn't say that anywhere on the internet. So, it's not exclusive to our website. So just be smart when you're using the website. The main goal of the website is, of course, to be coordinating, to connecting with each other in the real world. We're going to try to add events to the websites, though. Right now, the easiest way is just to create a cell or group in your community and organize through that. And also, I would like for it to be built out as it continues to grow in a way that as you travel around, you can connect with other cells, other people that you find on the map. Of course, being reasonable, being smart, and maybe not just meeting random people alone, but as a group trying to meet up. We've had several meetups happen through the websites. People have been talking about that, so that's really awesome to see. And then, just remember that the whole goal of the website is just to connect with each other, but to build real world cells. And I would suggest that if you join and you don't see anybody in your community, because this is what some people will email and say, well, there's nobody there, I would make sure to add yourself to the map, like your profile. Make sure to create a cell for your city or town or whatever. If there's nobody there, make sure so that other people come along, they'll join that group or they'll try to connect with you if they see you on the map. If there's no group in your state, then make a group for your state. If there's no group for your country or your continent yet, then make that group so that when other people come along, they have something to join and connect with, instead of just finding nothing and then thinking there's nobody else out there. So that's an important part of that. Is just creating your profile is not enough. You want to add yourself and create a cell or a group and add it to the map. And we have two different maps. There's one's the cell locator map, and then there's the individual map that shows you each person. And of course, we're just going to continue to try to improve the digital platform, but the goal is to help you guys find each other, to start organizing Freedom Cell meetings in the real world, and creating a network of people who can grow food and unplug and do all kinds of beautiful things. But that's where I'm going to leave it for myself today, and I'm going to pass it off to John now. And John is going to head up the meeting, keep things rolling. And again, we have 60 people right now on the call. Anybody who wants to speak, say something over here in the comments or raise your hands. John's going to keep up with that. And we'll also just try to dump any trolls we see as soon as we see them. All right, John, you there? Let me get you unmuted. All right, brother, what's up, man?
Hey, how are you?
All right, it's all yours. I'm going to let you take over.
Okay, cool. Well, it's really exciting to see so many beautiful, free human beings on this call. And I think that this movement, this idea has really come a long way. This concept sprung up, and I started sharing freedom cells back in 2016. And back then it was just an idea. Um, I was inspired by the idea of small groups. There's this guy named Nick Ludwig out of Minnesota who wrote this little small group manifesto, and he talked about how the Soviets, right, who are not, that wasn't freedom cells, but the Soviets, but they used little groups in order to recruit people to join their cause early on with like the Bolshevik Revolution. And then the early Christians used the small group philosophy. And at the time, for their missionary work. And at the time, the Oath Keepers, which is Stuart Rhodes' Oath Keepers organization, they had just started a small group at the county level, encouraging the creation of small groups. And then the work of Bob Podolski, for those of you that aren't familiar, he wrote a book called Flourish. And he and this gentleman named John David Garcia are actually the ones that did a lot of research to determine that 8 people is the optimal number for group creativity and effectiveness. The further you stray from 8, whether it's 12, 15, 20, or 2 to 4 or 5, the less effective, less creativity. The more people, the less cohesion there is. The fewer people, the less ideas and stuff. And this idea started sharing and spreading. And then when Derrick Broze learned of the concept, he really took it to a whole nother level with his audience and with speeches and organizing and the creation of the website and everything. So it's really awesome to see how far this idea has come. And now it's an international thing. So I just wanted to share a couple ideas and some goals that people can be doing in order to further freedom cells in their area. And then we'll open it up to questions, collaborations, people to share their stories going on in their area. One way to really get this going, and just a brief overview, like the freedom cell starts with what I call the inner cadre, which is roughly 8 people. It doesn't have to be 8. No one's going to hold you to it. This is like a whole, who knows, maybe there's better ways to do things, but this is just the idea, and this is how it's been successful in the past. You start with around 8 people, and you all work together on mutual goals. And then you encourage the creation of other groups of 8, preferably in your own geographic area, although this can transcend geographic areas with social, with the internet and stuff. And so then you encourage the creation of 8 or more other groups. And then when you have several different groups, these groups form up into a cell of their own. And this is what's called the Middle Cadre. So imagine, just to use the number 10 to make things easy, you have 10 people in your group, and then you find 10 groups of 10. Now you have a cell of 100 people. That group of 100 is supportive and engages in mutual aid, although they're not as dedicated to the original inner cadre. And imagine having 10 groups of 100. Now you have a meta cadre of 1,000. And this can just go on and on. There can even be like the group of 8 appoints one person to kind of be their representative. No coercion involved, of course, no taxation, but it's their representative. They form a council with one representative of each one of the groups within the 100, for example. That helps with the collaboration, with the coordination and stuff. So one way that we can really proliferate this, if you don't already have a cell in your area, is you set a goal. Okay, so one thing that we can do to really spread this is each individual on this call, there was like 60 people, 75 people a second ago. Imagine if we all create the goal of finding 8 other people. Now, maybe you already have your inner cadre cell working. If you don't, or if you do, even if you do, you get 8 people, and could be like an organizing cell with the goal of spreading this idea. And so you then meet with your 8 people. This doesn't necessarily have to be your inner cadre freedom cell. And also bear in mind, people can be in multiple different overlapping freedom cells. Maybe one is for engaging people, maybe one's the growing food freedom cell, or whatever. And so the goal with those 8 people is to form 8 other cells. And so you get those 8 people, you start working together, you start sharing this idea, and then each person, you all check in with each other once a week, once a month. Each person is encouraged to go form the cells, and then before you know it, you already have your middle cadre. So that's one thing that we can all do to start this idea, to start this momentum growing. And then again, that goal is to have a larger network, to further the network. And then one thing that people can do within their own inner cadre group, their original group of 8, is you start forming goals. And the original 4 goals that I thought would be effective to help people, towards sovereignty and being sustainable and helping through these crazy times that we actually find ourselves in, all the stuff we were speculating about, now we're there. So 4 goals. One would be to everyone have food storage, at least 3 months. I originally thought at least like 2 weeks, but I've upgraded that. If we're on the verge of an economic depression, then it would be very beneficial to have a whole lot of food storage. So that would be at least 3 weeks of 3 months of food storage. And those people can all chip in and collaborate to get a discount on bulk storage, for example, or each person then goes and shares their seeds and stores their seeds and stuff like that. Okay. And so that's one goal, food storage. A second goal is to everyone have an encrypted communication or an off-grid form of communication, like CB radios or whatever, especially if you're really close to one another. Or you have a Telegram group chat or Signal or whatever form of communication is your most preferential, preferably something that's encrypted. So food storage, everyone is on the same communication channel, on the same page. Maybe people want to use I forget what it is, but there's these collaborative platforms. There's a really popular one. And then the third goal, Slack. Yeah, Slack. The third goal would be for everyone to have firearms, to know how to use them safely and proficiently. Now, that's just me and my crew and my philosophy and thinking. I know when I've talked about freedom cells, there's been people that resonate with all the ideas, but then when I start talking about firearms ownership, they're like, no way, I'm not into that. And that's okay as well. Maybe there is, the gun nut freedom cell and the crazy people that are all about firearms freedom cells, but there could be a separate cell that is more into nonviolent resistance and they object to firearms. That's okay. And in that regard, these 2 groups could still collaborate with one another. It's all to each their own, right? So the third goal would be to everyone to have firearms. Maybe everyone gets the same type of ammunition. One moment, Matt, and I'll recognize you there. Everyone gets the same type of ammunition, like 9mm, so they can all buy it in bulk and save. And maybe they all get the same type of firearm. So when someone has a problem with a component of their firearm, they can all have backup, so on and so forth. And then the fourth goal, this is good for emergencies and stuff, is everyone has a bug out plan. If crap totally hits the fan, maybe you bug in, maybe I'll bug into one of the person's properties. They have the 10 acres or something. You don't even have to bug out together, just everyone to work together to ensure that everyone has a plan. And I believe that those 4 goals are something that would really help everyone along their way. So just to recap, in order to further this movement, if everyone on this call made a goal of reaching out and having 8 people, and then those 8 people are all tasked, the purpose of the little freedom cells can come and go. They could be something that sticks around for decades and we build our own version of a society, a free society, or they can be like a temporary freedom cell with just a simple goal. Once that goal is accomplished, that little network dissolves, right? But I strongly encourage people to set the goal to get 8 people together. First, you find those 8 people, then you all work together to form 8 little cells. And then before you know it, you could have your own little middle cadre. And then 4 goals for the individual groups where you work together with people would be food storage, at least 3 months, encrypted communication, some sort of communication channel, and then firearms, if you're into that. If not, then, work out your satyagraha, follow the work of MLK or Gandhi to deal with that. And then the other thing is to have bug out plans and stuff. So those are just some ideas I wanted to share. I see Bob Podolski join the call. We definitely want to hear from him here in a little bit. But Matt, I don't see where you are anymore, Matt. Let me try to find you so I can give you the floor to share something. Okay. I guess Matt dipped out. All right. If anybody wants to talk, if you have video going, you can raise your hand, or I can see here in the comments whoever wants to share something with us. So let me know, whoever wants to chat. All right, let's hear from Bob. So I mentioned Bob Podolski in his book earlier because it was the work of Bob Podolski and John David Garcia where they did a lot of research and determined that this optimal magic number is 8. Okay, Bob, if you want to share, just introduce yourself, and we'd love to hear how some of the data that you guys use to come up with this optimal number of 8 people? Just we'll let you riff on that for a sec, Bob. How you doing? Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure. So, all right, quite a group. We've got quite a group here. I'm impressed. Wow. Okay, so you want to hear from me now? Is that what's happening?
Yeah, we'd love to hear from you about some of the research you and John David Garcia did to determine this optimal number of 8 people, because we've really built a lot of the Freedom Cell concept and network around that magic number.
Okay, terrific. Well, I met John David in 1984, and for the next 17 years, I participated in a whole series of experiments that he initiated. And we basically wanted to know, how do you form an ethical society? And we knew that the number of people in a group was important. So we established some rather crude ways of measuring the creativity in a group. We picked creativity as the thing to measure because the more ethical a group is, the more creative it is. We maximize truth, awareness, creativity, and love. And when any one of those increases, they all increase. And when any one of them is limited or diminished, they are all limited or diminished. So we picked creativity, and we had some crude ways of measuring it. And then we experimented with groups of different sizes, 2 people, 3 people, up to about 20. And we plotted a curve. And by golly, it peaked at 8. Very distinctive peak. 7 and 9 were close, almost as good. Below 7 and above 9, the creativity of the group dropped off sharply. So then we looked into how do you, what else can you optimize for the creativity in a group? And we found, when we experimented with different ratios of men and women, we found that it worked best with equal numbers, or as close to equal numbers as we could get. And then decision-making became something that we looked into. What's the best way for such a group to make decisions? And after a lot of struggling with that question, we arrived at the answer that suited best to the facts. And that is, you need to make unanimous decisions so that anyone in the group perceiving a suggestion as unethical can challenge it. And then you have a discussion about it until you reach unanimity. If you don't have a unanimous decision, you don't have a group decision. And then there was one other thing that I only a couple of years ago came to realize is absolutely critical. And it's the hardest part of this whole process. And that has to do with the need for the members of the group to give each other feedback, honest feedback. And there are 2 parts to that. One part is actually having the awareness to give someone feedback that could be useful. But the even harder part is having the self-honesty to accept feedback from another person. We found that a lot of people are very defensive. And if you try to give them feedback that they could benefit from, they don't see it as helping them. They frequently see it as an attack, even when it's clearly not. And so one of the things I've worked on diligently for the last couple of years now, at least 18 months, maybe 2 years, has been, how do you teach people to lower their guard and to be honest enough to give and receive quality feedback? And in that regard, I've made some interesting discoveries, one of which is that the people who are the least open to feedback are the ones who have the most amnesia for their early childhood. So anyone can ask themselves the question, how much do I remember of my first 5 years? Most people remember very little of their first 5 years. And I have developed, it's not finished yet, but it's in process and it's coming along nicely, a series of steps that one can take to open oneself up to the truth of who am I? How did I get to be who I am? This turns out to be absolutely critical. An interesting byproduct of that is that when you're open to knowing yourself, you become immune to verbal abuse and insults. I've had many situations where I have challenged a group of people to insult me or to verbally abuse me. And when they do or attempt to, everybody winds up laughing because I'm immune. And I wasn't always. I taught myself to be immune to verbal abuse and insults. And anyone who wants to can learn that. I call the technique verbal kung fu. And it's mostly a matter of how you listen to what's being said to you. There's a big difference between somebody saying, "You are a Frasnorf," or saying, "I think you are a Frasnorf." There's a huge difference. The first statement is a statement about the person being addressed. The second is a statement about the person speaking. I think, blah, 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 as opposed to you are, blah, blah, blah. And every form of verbal abuse that I've been able to identify has had at least the implication of that you statement rather than an I statement. So with a little practice, it becomes very easy to know when someone is projecting their craziness onto you. And that makes you immune to verbal abuse. With a little practice. There's a little more to it than I've just outlined, but that's my 1 minute summary. So I recommend that people utilize some simple exercises to learn the verbal kung fu, to get over being sensitized to what people say to you in a negative way, and to basically move ahead with forming an ethical society. And whether you call it a octalog or a maxer, I sometimes call them maxers. These little groups, these freedom cell groups, are cool. And so the group becomes capable of coming up with solutions to problems way beyond what you would expect in a committee. The octalog, or the freedom cell, is to the committee what a laser is to a light bulb. And the result, when you form groups of octalogs working together in such a way that they have ethical contracts binding them together for ethical purposes, I call that combined group a holomat. And there's no limit to how big a holomat can be. So you could have millions of octalogs joined together in a giant contract. We have templates, at least I have templates that I'm going to be distributing for putting together these bigger groups made up of smaller groups. There's a lot to learn to do this stuff right, but the rewards are enormous. Whether you're an individual, a couple, parents, social clubs, or a business. And I've identified 4 different kinds of businesses. A business could be a mom and pop business. It could be a capital-based startup. It could be a nonprofit, or it could even be a very successful business that has gotten so big it's gone into decline. A very common thing among businesses. As they get bigger, they get bureaucratized. For those who haven't heard it before, bureaucracy is the systematic elimination, destruction, or avoidance of corrective feedback. That's the nature of bureaucracy. So as businesses get bigger, they tend to become bureaucratized. They become immune to feedback. And the result, predictably, is they lose their creativity and they decline. They go down, and eventually they go out of business when they run out of money. So we now have a technology that can help such organizations to restore their creativity so that they don't stay in decline.
Right
This
on.
is a very doable proposition.
Well, thank you so much, Bob, for sharing, and thank you so much for the work that you've done. I posted the link to Bob's website, titanians.org, and also a link where you can order the book Flourish. It talks about Bob's ethics, which I think are really on point and pretty much just in line with consistent voluntarism. And then he also has a lot of really good strategy and kind of the nuts and bolts of the how-to, which I think is lacking a lot in our communities and movements, how to get from here to there. So definitely check that out. And Bob brings up a really good point, which I've been involved in a lot of organizations, a lot of political organizations, a lot of business organizations, nonprofits. And one of the most destructive things tends to be the infighting, the drama, call it whatever you will. So one thing that we can do within our freedom cells and within our network is to establish guidelines, recommend best practices for communicating with one another, for giving each other feedback. I think one of the best tools out there also is nonviolent communication. So before these problems inevitably come up from the offset, we can have a mechanism of correction, a mechanism airing of the grievances, for example, in place already. So whenever there does arise conflict, it's not just starting to call names and drama and shouting matches. It's like, okay, this seems like the perfect opportunity for us to utilize the nonviolent communication we've been practicing, or the soul bonding, which is a technique that Bob has. And I want to point out too, there's a lot of overlap. Bob has what he calls an octalog, which is very similar in nature to a freedom cell. With the freedom cell thing, we're trying to have the freedom for people to experiment with this general concept. That's why we say 8 is optimal. It can vary from that. And then also like the way that people reach decisions. In my personal freedom cell, I have like a informal freedom cell that includes part of my family, like my parents. I don't know how down and dirty they want to get with our true goals of creating an alternative free society, and eventually potentially pushing back against the existing government society. But I think if you can get close enough with the people and everyone's on the same page, a consensus system may work. However, to do a freedom cell doesn't necessarily have to be consensus. And I think the beauty of the experimentation is that if we all humble ourselves, we can learn from one another. So like, maybe this works better. Maybe that works better. One thing that I think is pretty certain, like there's just a straight majority, like 50% plus 1 doesn't seem to be working out for society at this point. So, and the consensus is a good strategy because it helps people to get on the same page. So the hope is that we all actually start doing this and living this. And then when we come on these calls, we can share best practices with one another. So at this point, I'd like to open up the floor. If anybody wants to share any successes or stories, or do we have anyone in the organization that has a full-on freedom cell or is tapped into the level where there's multiple freedom cells in their area? We'd love to hear from you guys, or if anyone has any questions or wants any advice on anything. Let's hear from you. Here's somebody raising their hand. All right, Wes, you have the floor. What's going on? Wes, can you hear us? Unmute. Lower hand, unmute. Okay, there you go, Wes.
Guys, hello.
Hey, go ahead.
Okay, great. Well, I was on one of the first calls that Derrick organized. We met at Envision Fest in 2018 and hung out again there in 2019 and got to connect. If anyone remembers me, I have property off the coast of Vancouver, British Columbia, on Gambier Island, about 5 acres, where we're living in solution. Certainly could describe it as a freedom cell. But I am not Canadian. I'm actually born in America. Not that I identify as an American. But so I'm currently in Venice Beach, Southern California. And if anyone is in this area, please reach out, because I do believe that it is the the human to human interaction that really matters. The novelty of Zoom parties and everything is wearing off really quick. When you type something down, you create two neural pathways. When you write something down, you create over 20 some. So you can imagine that the human interaction is so much more rewarding than these screen times. So I would really like to focus on the takeaways on how we can come together in person and find like minds. Because maybe your friend is in Venice Beach, but they're not on this call. Maybe you can connect them with me. Another one of the hubs that I frequent is Sedona, Arizona. That's where my brother lives. Derrick, I would like to know where you are in Mexico, because I know a lot of people in the health and wellness community and also crypto are starting things in Tulum. Let us give us an update there. But I wanted to keep it brief and just say hi to everyone and introduce myself again and keep this rolling. I won't be long-winded, so thank you so much.
Oh, there we go. I don't know if Derrick heard that about exactly where he's at. Miriam is here, Derrick's better half, and maybe she can share where you guys are. Hey, Miriam.
Dave, you want me to share where we're at?
Or maybe they want to keep their location secret, just like
Okay.
he's keeping his name secret, Born Dane.
Hi guys, can y'all hear me? We are currently in Morelia, Mexico. We are about 3.5 hours north of San Miguel de Allende, where we also have some other friends that are also looking into building community out here in Mexico. And yeah, it's been very beautiful out here. We've had the freedom to roam around as we please. There hasn't been really much quarantining out here or stay-at-home orders. Well, there is, but nobody's really following them. There's a lot of businesses that are open, and even from the very beginning, when we found the vendors that we wanted to support out here, I got their phone numbers and I told them, just in case you decide that you want to close down shop, if ever like that stay-at-home order comes to play. And they're like, well, we're not going to do so, but either way, here's our number. And sure enough, everybody stayed open. So it's pretty awesome. Yeah, and more people are coming out of their cocoons out here for those that did decide to stay home. And yeah, it's very full of energy. The weather out here is nice. We actually found out, I found this paper that shared more about the weather in Morelia. And it turns out that it's pretty good weather throughout the whole year for growing food, and the soil and the spots that we have found up in the mountains and over by the lake seem to be very fertile and clean. So there's not very much, what are they called? What are the plains called, babe? The plains? There's not much spraying out here. So that's nice. 5G is not out here yet, so that's nice. But yeah, just like any other place, we don't know how long it's going to last before Mexico, I guess.
Right on.
Okay. But yeah, the land out here, it's really nice. Every weekend we're out scouting land and looking for land. And actually, we're heading out to the lake in just a moment after this call to go look at the land out there. There's about 25 acres by the lake nearby that somebody's selling, and it sounds to be at a good price. So we wanted to go check it out. The lake's beautiful. We can get that clean water for the land connected out there. Yeah, we have connected with some people out here who are doing permaculture and community already, so they know more about the land that we can gather that information to start to grow and to start our own permaculture project. Other than that, I think we will be sending out another email to anybody who is interested in joining us or getting more information about the pieces of land that we're finding out here. And if you decide that you want to come to Mexico, or if you just want to check out the options, please email us. The email is exitandbuild@protonmail.com. And yeah, we're just going to keep everybody updated on that project, and sharing the different options so that people can also start their own freedom cells out here if they decide. And if one property doesn't work for them, that they have many options, and those would be the options that we're checking out. So yeah, please email us,
Cool.
guys.
Thanks a lot, Miriam. Her and Derrick are really doing it. You know, it's cool to watch what they got. Someone else that's doing it is Michael Niemitz. Speaking of Mexico, Michael is home based in Acapulco. There's the Anarchapulco community down there, and he is definitely no stranger to community building and community organizing. He's doing regular Zoom calls and meetings and in-person meetings, and he's just a hub for the community down there in Acapulco, especially during the conference when there's just a huge swell of like-minded folks that come down. So Michael, go ahead and share what's on your mind with us.
Yeah, John, I really appreciate that introduction. Thank you so much. I feel certainly what we're trying to do today, build community, is something I'm really all about. And I love Acapulco, and for those of you who've been to Acapulco, it's a great place, and it just keeps getting better. That's why I live here. It's because I love this place so much. And speaking of all of the things that everybody else has said, I think Mexico is a place, and I've got a lot of reasons why. I don't want to go to all of them. All I'll say is there's a difference in the culture here that makes them much more agreeable to good ideas versus doing the conditioning. And that's a really big thing. I did want to comment on in general groups. We tried to do an octalog here, a couple octalogs in fact, and and then all the other things we did as far as community, we ran into some problems, and so that kind of led me down a path of learning more about how to build teams and reflecting on my past as a project manager. And so I've put together something I call ethical emergence, which is kind of a pathway to that. But it starts off with the simple things, which I think West mentioned. The idea of writing as creating like 20 neural pathways. The first thing is journaling and kind of getting to know yourself. And so for each one of us, if we can like find out what our strengths are and kind of just self-analyze ourselves. And then the next step is being able to have a meaningful conversation. So being able to express yourself and assert yourself is another key element to having people that can be team members. And so this is the thing, man. We've gone down a path where we've been conditioned to be so critical of ourselves and other people that it's hard to work together for any length of time, because we're always hit with a bunch of negativity from social media and everything. And it creates a problem where it's very hard for relationships to stick together. And then nobody tells us how to build trusting relationships. And so that's kind of what I'm after here, is trying to help people get that to the point that they see the wisdom of what Bob is saying. Because until they can actually interact and have meaningful conversations with each other and learn how, the next step is like the logic, the digging deep. But in any case, I just want to say I'm here to like help everybody. I certainly, the people that are here in Mexico, I definitely want to help them in any way I can. And if you come to Acapulco, I love Acapulco, and I'm trying to help every way I can as far as keeping the faith alive in regards to what we exposed to in Acapulco, and certainly just creating the invitation for people that are voluntarists to come down to Acapulco in February. It's a beautiful time to be down here. So all those things that essentially try and help our community, my community, because as much as I love Acapulco, I love all of you people too, because you are leading the way.
Okay, there we go. Okay, cool. Thank you so much for sharing, Michael. And yeah, I've visited Acapulco twice now, and it's absolutely incredible. And like Miriam pointed out, and Michael pointed out, their freedom is really ripe in Mexico. There's also crime and a lot of poverty and a very corrupt narco state. However, looking at the silver line of things, I think it's actually the fact that there's a narco state that creates a vacuum of power. In fact, that's a lot of how the classical Enlightenment, the Enlightenment period, and all these classical liberal ideas started to flourish in Europe, was because there started to be competition between the church and the state. And it wasn't just one total sovereign power over everything. So perhaps in that conflict, there could also be the opportunity for freedom to flourish a little more. And a lot of people think Acapulco is completely unsafe. That's not the case. It's unsafe if you're involved in organized crime or if your family members involved in organized crime. But if you go down there and you just stick to yourself, be a good person, don't go off searching to buy drugs or whatever, then it's really safe. And in fact, there's very few and far between occurrences of tourists or expats that have bad things that happen to them, unless they're out getting into trouble, so to speak. So, and Michael is so welcoming and such a great host down there. So anyone could reach out to him and he'll definitely get you set up with resources, trusted places to stay, show you the ropes down there. It's definitely worth checking it out. And that's just one of many areas in the world where there's starting to be a growing concentration of like-minded people where we really can do this type of stuff. Michael, you had something to add to that? Hold on there. Unmute. Okay, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, in regard to the crime, there is like a bad 1%, but then there's this lovely 99% of people here that are just so freaking helpful. And as you get yourself engaged more into the community, it just becomes just more and more loving. And then, on top of that, Acapulco has been in this circumstance for about 30 years now, where the economy has been, constantly being drawn down because of the government's like restrictions as far as tourist and air travel, and then of course the propaganda. But they've already gone through like 30 years of experience of this stuff, so they're pretty well versed in getting through hard times. And it's certainly something we should learn from. So like, I think if people want to come down here and check it out, I'll be more than happy to give people a lot on why this is such a wonderful place to be. And I've been all over the world. I've been looking for a place to live for a long time. And to me, this is my number one choice.
Cool.
Thanks,
Michael.
What was the other thing you mentioned? Get you fired up about this.
We kind of had trouble hearing you there. Okay, cool. Somebody was asking how the locals treat people, and I would say from my personal experience, they are so welcoming and helpful and sweet and kind, and just the Mexican people in general have that open arms, welcoming, kiss on the cheek kind of vibe in general. And in Mexico too, there's a lot that we can learn as far as agorism goes, because entrepreneurship is just flourishing down there. And it's not big corporations and companies necessarily. It's the family that's running the little nook store that's tucked away, or it's the young people that are going up and down the beach hustling the mangoes with the chili powder and everything. And everybody's super cool. And another institution that's big in Mexico, there's been so much social engineering that's been taking place in the United States, so hardcore all over, but it's a really special brand of authoritarianism in America. There's that quote that says, "None are more hopelessly enslaved than those who falsely believe they're free." And so we have that phenomenon going on in the States. But the state has really risen to power the church has been weakened in the United States, and the family we see being weakened through public schooling, through propaganda, through all sorts of stuff. But in Mexico, the family is very much an institution that's very healthy and alive. And with that comes mutual aid, support, lending a helping hand up when someone is out. So I think there's so much that we can learn from other cultures, and Mexico is a great place to experiment with this stuff and for freedom and all that good stuff. So let's oh yeah, another big thing is the vigilante groups, and how you have basically militia. I was going to say citizen militia, but I don't like the word citizen. You have militia organizations. They're called auto defensa groups, where they have risen up and organized themselves. Unfortunately, the firearms they use can't keep up with the government and the cartels, but there's many communities. Chadon is a great example, which I've had the privilege of visiting and meeting with the elders, and they showed us around and told us their story. But when it comes to defense, which I think is a really key component, if we are to assert our sovereignty, once our numbers become strong enough, there's a lot to learn from them, where they've set up checkpoints to keep criminals out, where they have really secured autonomy, not 100% autonomy, but that's a goal that they have in Chadon especially. And then of course you have the Zapatista movement in the southern part of Mexico. There's so much history there. And even though, again, there's an authoritarian government, there's very harmful cartels, the spirit of freedom is very much alive and well. And I think there's a lot to learn. It's definitely worth visiting. And Acapulco is a great conference to go as an excuse to go down there. And there's a bunch of people there. But travel is really important for this in general, for learning. So if anybody has any comments, we'd love to hear some stories from people, maybe some inspiration on successes that you've had. There's Bob. All right, what do you got, Bob?
I have been talking with people in southern Mexico for a while now, and I'm actually putting an organization together. I would like to share with you, if I can share my screen, I'd like to show you a diagram, organizational diagram of what I've begun constructing. May I do that?
Let me, I think I can make you the host real quick, and then you can share the screen.
Or he
Okay,
hyperlink
just for a couple of moments.
in the comments, and we could just all look on our own.
What was that?
Yeah, I'm going to make you the host, then share your screen, and then pass it back. And
Okay.
Here we go.
Okay. Say when.
Okay, you should be able to share your screen now.
Okay. Let's see if I can do that.
There you go.
Nice.
Okay. Can you see that? Each of these little octagons represents an octalog, or a freedom cell. And as you can see, they are organized. There are actually 13 groups of them, and they have different purposes that coincide. Where any two octagons touch, they're presumed to have an ethical contract between them. I have templates for the contracts. And there are places like between the money and business, between over here, the money and business holomat and the education holomat, we have a couple of octalogs that are members of both holomats. Just the way an individual can be a member of more than one octalog, an octalog can be a member of more than one holomat. So this is an idealized diagram, but it's you're used to thinking of organizational diagrams as being like pyramids. This is horizontal, flat. There's nobody in here has jurisdiction or control over anyone else. Not on the individual level, not on the octalog level, not on the holomat level. This is an ethical society idealized, okay? I am currently beginning to implement the populating of this diagram starting in southern Mexico and hopefully spreading elsewhere. I have colleagues in quite a few other places, a couple in the UK, some in the United States, some in Australia, and of course, some here in Mexico, because I too am in Mexico. I'm also in Acapulco. And I would welcome having people reach out to me subsequent to this meeting, because I want to be collaborating with you guys. I want to be working hand in glove with you in terms of making things happen jointly, together. I just wanted you to have a peek at this diagram because it represents an entire system, and there's no limit to how big this thing could grow. This could become a world girdling institution, an ethical society with all kinds of resources and stuff that people can take advantage of. This is my hope. And here in southern Mexico, I'm talking about Acapulco, Tepoztlan, San Cristobal. These are some towns down here where there are already people interested in this. And we may be able to actually make it happen down here. I've got people who are bilingual, who are both Spanish speakers and good at English. And we're starting to put this thing together. And I want to invite all of you. Oh, and by the way, when it comes to octalogs or freedom cells, I see them as being in two kinds. One kind is the natural octalog, where everyone is physically together. You can actually get together in the same room. And that has some real advantages when you can do it. But if you can't, then one or more of the members of your octalog might be only available by video chat. And I call that a virtual octalog because it's not quite the same thing. It's not quite. It could be quite good, but it's not the same as having a group of people literally sitting in the same room together. Okay, I just wanted to share that. I'm going to unshare it now. Stop the sharing. Is there something I have to do to pass the hosting back to you? How do I do that? I see you waving. I see you pointing up to the left. Okay, let's see here. What do I have to do here? I see the recording. Not quite clear what to do.
There we go. Okay, thanks, Bob. I think Derrick went ahead and overrode it. In the future, for people that are doing Zoom, I think you can pass the host to someone else by clicking on the three dots that are next to their name in the top right, and then you do make host. So, one thing I want to point out, Bob, Michael, Derrick, and probably many people on the call are doing it, right? And so there's a big advantage to doing it, right? Because there's a lot of talk, there's a lot of sharing of ideas, and that's all fine and well, and that's all an important component of creating the society, of securing our freedoms. But the most important thing we could do is take that leap and go out and get our hands dirty and go do it, because we can only read so many books and do so much research on the internet and so many ideas and do so many Zoom calls. Where the rubber meets the road is when we start building these organizations and these networks. And I myself more recently have just become more inspired to get active again on this front. I really leaned heavily into entrepreneurship to try to secure a better life, a better standard of living for me and my family. But with all this stuff happening right now with the coronavirus and the COVID-19, this pandemic, now is a better opportunity than ever, than in recent years, where people are looking for answers. They're looking for another way. And there's talk about going back to the normal. Well, we don't want to go back to the way things were done before. And we definitely don't want to go back to the way that those that are in power would like things to be like. So we have an opportunity to present an alternative. And I think this Freedom Cell network, this Octalog Holomat, decentralized peer-to-peer permaculture ethos is a time that's ripe. So Danny wanted to share something. Danny Panzella out of Staten Island, Brooklyn. Good friend of me and Derrick's here. Danny, what do you got? How you going? How you doing?
I'm good. We're here in Prospect Park right now. Vanessa's with me.
Where's your mask? I'm just kidding.
I'm carrying it, but I'm not wearing it. Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment about the fact that because the federal government is so corrupt, they don't really try to control the municipalities the way they do here in the United States, where everything's very tightly regulated, especially if you're living in cities. And I'm sure there are places in the US where you could find, maybe in Wyoming, Montana, in the sticks, where you can find, counties that are more lax like that. But in what I've seen in Mexico is that these tiny little towns are often by the governments, both state and federal. And so the people are really left to their own to develop their own organizations. The town where Vanessa's family is from, they have a private organization that basically over the last 30 years has really not just helped their town. I mean, it's a tiny town. It's less than 10,000 people, but they just built a brand new hospital, all on donation. Well, mostly on donations. I think they did get a little bit of federal funding, but for the most part, it was all done on donations. They have perfectly paved streets. I mean, the town is beautiful. It's nothing like you would think of a tiny little town in Mexico. You kind of get that image that you might see in the movies, right? But it's not like that at all. And so because there's so much autonomy and it's left to kind of these private organizations, they can really set up governance the way they want to. So it's definitely possible to set up an anarchist or a voluntarist or freedom cell community in a lot of these places. Probably not as much, probably more opportunity than there are in large cities. Although I have not been to Acapulco and seen, how that community is doing. So, that's not to say that, to criticize what Acapulco is doing. I just think it's probably easier. You can probably find an easier time in some of these smaller places. And I think another concern that I think I would like to share is for people who are going down there, and I'm sure the people that are already living there have already, kind of integrated themselves into the communities. But I think it's important to do that and not kind of go in and try to, like, how Americans are sometimes. We just kind of cowboys strutting around, and to go down there and kind of, I don't know, ruffle feathers. I think it should all be done in a kind of in a respectful way, rather.
That's a great point for sure. You want to be respective of the culture and everything going on. Thank you so much for sharing. I know Danny spent some time in Mexico as well, and he's currently in one of the most authoritarian places. Danny has a great blog called sovereigninthe.city.com that really talks about how you can find freedom and sovereignty. You do live on the suburbs. And I think an important thing that we can do, there's a choice that we have. We can move to a place that perhaps has more political freedom or has more opportunity for community building. Or B, if you stay in your geographic area, you can hunker down and just make the best opportunity you have. So throughout all this, I think it's important as a network for us to always be sharing where these places are that could be a bastion of freedom, or where these places are where there's already a big network of people. I know there's a lot of activists and anarchists in Houston, and Derrick Broze and the Houston Freethinkers and stuff. We have a great community here in Central Texas. Texas is relatively more free place, although the city governments are pretty authoritarian. New Hampshire has the Free State Project, where they have, I don't know how many boots on the ground now, but probably like 3,000 to 4,000 like-minded, networked libertarians and activists and voluntarists up there. So even though it's a big step and some people may be more able to than others, if you find yourself feeling isolated, first of all, you'd probably be surprised if you get out there. There's more like-minded people than we think. But if you are in one of the more authoritarian places, like a Boston, Massachusetts, for example, or even people that are in other countries, big cities, consider making the move, even if it takes a little bit of time. We're all here to help. Like, for example, if someone wanted to move to Acapulco, Michael Niemitz, I know, would go out of his way to help with the information and help getting you connected and everything. I saw a second ago somebody wanted to say something. Jenny Donahue. Let me find you on here. Oh, there you are. Okay, Jenny, how are you today? Thanks for joining us.
Good. I'm really excited to be here with you guys, actually. I mostly I feel like the thing I run into a lot, and even what I've struggled with a lot, is people feeling alone, having ideas, seeing just the idea for community, but not figuring out how to form that in their area. And I feel like for me, what I've really realized is if I can't find people that quite have the same understanding or awareness as I do yet, finding people and meeting them at their level of awareness and finding ways to involve them now. Like, I've connected with a lot of people who have a lot of abilities with gardening, and I know that they'll get involved in a gardening project. So I kind of am almost tricking people into participating. Like, they don't know what they're investing in, but when it comes time, they'll see the fruit of it. But I just try to get people involved in any project I'm doing. Like, I'm trying to work on a logo. I go by Vigilante on Freedom Cells. So I'm working on a logo, and I just thought, you know what, I have a graffiti artist friend. I can get him to help me with the logo. He doesn't even understand what it's all about yet, but like now he's included. So I just kind of want to encourage people to keep your eye out for people who just are at least interested or like open to learning and just helping you build while you're searching. And maybe they'll kind of even convert like as you're working together and listening to your stories and that kind of thing. So
I really appreciate that. That's actually something that Samuel Edward Konkin talks about as a strategy in the New Libertarian Manifesto, where you have agorism, which is essentially revolutionary market anarchism, creating alternative economies, black and gray markets. And then, of course, you have traditional libertarianism, which he embodies with like the Libertarian Party, people that are trying to do political reformation. And what he says to do is to go involve yourself with libertarians that are doing political things and to teach them about agorism. On the flip side, there's plenty of agorists, like your neighborhood pot dealer, for example. He's an agorist that doesn't really know about libertarianism, but you can bet your bottom dollar he's not a fan of the state because maybe he's been put in jail for selling a plant before. You start talking to them about agorism. And this is a strategy that me and the mother of my kiddos were doing early on, Catherine. We always found ourselves involved in these different networks. Gardening and permaculture was one of them. Another one was unschooling, like this radical child-led learning methodology. And so we would be coalescing with these unschoolers who, for the most part, were more freedom-minded than even the libertarians I would hang out with because they just lived the freedom philosophy and they had respect for their children's freedom, which is very rare, even in a lot of libertarian circles. And so we were there talking about them, and we would just slowly start talking a little bit more and more about why the government is so terrible and the public schools have created so much harm. And so you bring that philosophy on to everyone. But also on that note, while it may be ideal for us to be building these networks with anarchists and people that want to eventually replace the government with something more in line with our freedom, I feel like this network and this philosophy doesn't have to be so necessarily the strategy doesn't have to be set so ideologically bent. Now, on that front, obviously, like if we're coalescing with liberty-leaning people, anarchists, then it's going to be easy to have an ethical society like Bob Podolski talked about, because we all agree with like we shouldn't aggress upon one another, so on and so forth. Whereas if we were building this society with a socialist, they may be comfortable saying, well, maybe we need to force the Freedom Cell members to pay a tax so we can do so on and so forth. But that being said, there's a lot of people out there, gardeners, for example, that they don't really care so much about the political philosophy. And a lot of people are just in this world trying to lead a better life, a more productive life, a happier life, a life that's more in line with sustainability or Mother Nature or self-sufficiency. And sometimes if we come at it like, hey, my name's John, I'm a radical anarchist, and I want to see the government replaced with a free society where we have mutual aid and we have self-defense groups that are patrolling the neighborhoods, that may be like, whoa, wait a second. But if you come at it like, hey, we're trying to build a mutual aid society where we can help one another, and like that's what the goal is, to create a way where people can come together and help one another. That may be an easier approach. And it's all about gauging the level that the other people are and meeting them where they're at. I will say, though, the government and politicians are some of the best players on our team, because nowadays they're making it really easy for people to be like, yeah, the government sucks. You guys have another way of doing things? Cool, I'm in. So does anybody else have any ideas or thoughts they want to share? I'd really love to hear from some people that they like the freedom cell concept, and they're maybe feeling a little, having some reservations. They don't know what the first steps are. As I shared earlier, one great first step is to try to find 8 people if you can, if not just 2 or 3 people, and then encourage those 2 or 3 people to start finding another 2 or 3 people, or up to 8 people, to start building that out. That's one great way to start. If also people want to share where they have found an abundance of like-minded people, or people that are looking to build these networks, there's permaculture meetups, there's farmers markets, there's Facebook groups, there's voluntarist meetups, libertarian meetups, cryptocurrency meetups. These are all great places to recruit. Was Wes the guy that was trolling earlier? Anybody remember? Give me a thumbs up. All right, we're just going to see if it's the same Wes. Let's see. Wes, are you with us?
I'm with you. I'm not a troll.
Okay, he's not the troll. All right. Oh, that was Matt, I believe. Okay, Wes, how you doing? What's on your mind, buddy?
Good, man. I spoke earlier. I just left a couple of things in the chat I wanted to share. One is the Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association. This is basically run by Sheriff Mack, who successfully sued the government. And so you want to live in an area where a sheriff is a constitutionalist, and you can educate your sheriff if he's not. So I think one of the places where freedom cells will be successful is in counties where sheriffs allow basically freedom. The other link that I dropped was, if anyone's familiar with Anastasia and the Ringing Cedars of Russia movement, this is an amazing book series that if you haven't read, you should probably get into, because it predicts about everything that's happening now, and the solution is in nature, and us resonating with nature, and us working with the life force of the planet and growing our own food, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But anyway, I won't hold the mic much longer. I'd like to keep these brief. Thanks, guys. Keep it rolling.
Thanks a lot, Wes. That's great. Yeah, the Constitutional Sheriffs Association, or Richard Mack, he took on the federal government and sued them over the Brady bill. Super successful. And his concept is starting to gain ground with sheriffs that are pushing back with the lockdowns and all that stuff. So anybody else want to chat? I don't know if maybe we should wrap this up pretty soon. I'm not sure how long we've been going on, but is there anything anyone wants to hear about that some of the people that have been speaking could share? Like if anybody has any questions or needs some advice, myself, Bob, Derrick, Michael. All right. And remember, some people are just joining us. A freedom cell essentially is a small group of people, preferably as close as possible to the number 8, that work together with mutual goals, mutual aid. Those people then share how great life has become now that they have their freedom cell with other people, encouraging the creation of other small groups of people. Whenever you have enough small groups, those small groups can then form up into a mid-sized group. Now you have maybe 80 to 100 people that are working together for mutual benefit. You increase your effectiveness, you increase your safety. If you guys are pushing the boundaries, then maybe you start encouraging regional groups that are, in Central Texas. There could be a couple East Austin groups. There could be a group in San Marcos, which is just south of us. And before you know it, you form up those 10 groups of 100 into a group of 1,000. This network begins spreading all across the world, where you have pockets of 10, pockets of 100, pockets of 1,000 here and there. We all associate confederate, so to speak, into a larger group of 10,000 where we support one another, we do fundraising to help one another, we share ideas and strategies. And eventually, when we have enough people, if the cells are willing to take a little bit more risk, we can then potentially opt out of participation with the state and support one another, defend one another if it comes to that. So it doesn't have to be like that. It could just stay as a mutual aid group. But I have big aspirations and see how this network, this infrastructure could eventually replace many of the mechanisms of the state. But the idea is just to start small. So just want to remind, I think we'll go ahead and wrap it up, and Derrick Broze can give some closing statements. But to remind folks, some of the ideas that I had earlier, some goals is you yourself start finding those 8 like-minded people, close people, family members, existing friends, go out and find other like-minded people that might be interested, but also create a freedom cell that's an organizing freedom cell where it's around 8 people. And the goal of that cell is to share ideas, to reach goals, and to go out and try to create 8 more groups. And then when you have your own inner cadre group, 4 goals that are super beneficial for right now would be to have at least 3 months food storage. You guys can pool your money so you can get discount on bulk food, or maybe so-and-so has really rich soil over here. This guy's got the garage hydroponic system there. This guy has the food bank. You all work together to grow the food together and learn from one another. Or maybe one person has a 2-acre homestead and everyone can go to their place every Sunday to work on the community garden. The second goal was for everyone to have an encrypted communication channel or ham radio. Somebody posted some links to ham radio stuff, CB radios. A Telegram group is really simple and effective. And so you stay in touch, you share with one another, you support one another through that group. If you're into firearms, everyone in your group should have firearms and know how to use them safely and proficiently. Consider using the same caliber weapon or the same, everyone gets Glocks, for example. So when someone has a problem, they can replace it with this other part. You guys can buy bulk ammunition. Doesn't have to be ammo. If you're more of a passive or nonviolent resistance kind of guy, we can still all work together and coalesce together. And then the fourth goal would be for people to have a bug out plan in these crazy times. Doesn't have to be a group where it doesn't have to be everyone goes to the same place, but just work together to make sure everyone's on the same page and working towards that. Because if crap hits the fan, you may not want to be in the inner city place where there could be trouble. So those are just 4 goals that are good starting places that you can work on with your freedom cell. And again, the idea is to form that cell with your inner people and then to encourage others to form cells. And then let's all experiment, learn as we go, and just stay in touch. So thanks everyone for joining this call. Yeah, peace and freedom. Let's keep it up. Super inspiring to see all these people on here doing it, learning about it, inspired to take action. All right, we'll turn it over to Born Dane.
All right, man. Thank you. Thank you, John, for that. Thank you, everybody who participated today. Just a couple of closing thoughts. You know, everything we talked about, from what Bob shared to Michael, John, and the few others, it's the concept of freedom cell specifically, as I learned it from John, as I've tried to propagate it over the last few years, is very decentralized in the sense of each freedom cell is going to look different based on your environment, your needs, your area, you know, the people involved. Those are the people who are going to create what a freedom cell is. So we can offer ideas and tips on how to put it together, but ultimately they're all going to be unique. And that's the beauty of it, I think. And if you're not on the Freedom Cells website yet, please do join it today. Go ahead and join. Like I said at the beginning of the meeting, we've had just an explosion of people signing up. Really start to use it. I'm starting to use it more and post on it and share and connect. And I just created a permaculture resources cell, for example. So if you want to go join that, there's people sharing ideas about learning permaculture and anything else. But again, the goal, though, of course, is to connect in the real world, to use the website as a platform to find each other, to create local cells. So if there's no cell in your city, your state, your country, your continent, create one. Be the first one to build one there and to build it on the website so that other people who come along can find you and continue to build. So yeah, I think we're going to leave it there. Just continue to use the website. We can do this on a monthly basis or as people feel inclined. And I would also suggest that even it doesn't have to happen on this level. If you start getting some action on the local level and there's multiple freedom cells, you can organize your own in-person coordinating events and discussion events, because the goal is for us to share the resources and share the skills that we're all learning. And I also could envision it really becoming a network that as people travel, they can connect with other like minds and connect with the other communities and the off-grid communities and the permaculture farms and the farmers markets and the people who know what's up, and be a part of that network. And if the Underground Railroad does become necessary, then that will be a part of that as well. So lots of exciting things. Thank you to everybody who's joined, who's choosing to take effort and make, just try to do something, because we got to find solutions. So thank you guys. Oh, one final point. If you do enjoy Freedom Cells, I think a big part of this is to promote it. Tell other people, share this on social media. Let your friends and family know you got into this weird concept called Freedom Cells or mutual aid groups or octalogs or whatever you like to call it. We've had people call them hives and hubs and circles. It doesn't really matter. It's the concept of decentralized small groups of people coming together and organizing. Let other people know that this is a great idea and that the Freedom Cells platform is doing so great and you want people to be a part of it. That's how it's going to grow, by word of mouth. This kind of idea has to grow organically. So it's up to each of us to promote it and to build it. So thank you guys. And I did record the call. I don't know if people want